Holt, Mays,
Yes.
Weller.
All right. With approval of agenda, if I could just move item C up to the front, so Neil and Dave offered to come up to answer any open questions or anything. And that way they don't have to stay for the mundane stuff, the remainder of the meeting. With that, can I have approval for the agenda? Mays, seconded by Allen. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes last meeting, distributed with the packet. Questions, comments, additions, deletions, motion to approve.
So moved.
Ambrose, second Mays, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same, thank you. Farnsworth, at the last board meeting, we had a lot of questions, and the chairman agreed to call a special meeting to give people time to bring forth whatever. We held that meeting on the 30th, maybe, I think. At any rate, at that meeting, a lot of questions, comments, good questions and comments. But the resultant vote was to move forward with what on Dave's diagram was step 3, the schematic. And their proposal for that was distributed, and you should all have copies of that. And because it has been approved, we also need to get approval for finance to actually spend the money. And it's on finance's agenda for Wednesday evening. That said, are there any particular questions about the schematic proposal?
There's one item here that says confirm need for lift stations.
Yes. Does the
garage use a lift station? The highway garage?
Gastell's not, our other civil, Darrell's not here, he would know the answer to that, I do not. One of the things we were talking about on the civil side, we're trying to make sure that we got it, as Dave pointed out, the whole idea of this is to get a better cost, and kind of identify the use and get the cost nailed down. Some of it's gonna depend on the elevation, and just where we put that building and how it's plumbed. So I think that's really what Jeff, our other civil, is talking about.
Possibility is there of needing one.
Yeah, or an injector pump, something along that line. And we're just gonna have to get into the topographic survey to figure out the ground elevations that are there now. And then, the earthwork balance and just how we place the building, how we place the parking lot. So there's just some variables that we just don't know. And it has everything to do with cost.
I'll have to admit that I read through this and I'm not smart enough to figure out if this is a good plan or not. There's too many codes that need to be followed and software that's used to determine this, and it baffled out of me. So I trust you to, I guess, do the right thing.
Darrell, for years being involved, I've always said that's why we hire engineers, architects, lawyers, people that have the education, and yep, they use terminology that we might not always know, but we do hire people that we feel we can trust and have our best interests. One thing I just would mention, at one of the meetings, it was a special meeting as we were given final consideration, Tim Schaefer raised an issue, and actually I talked to Tim, he was here earlier tonight, about, with the state of the state, if you will, you never know the future of grants and that sort of thing, and that obviously can affect staffing. And I was talking to Marty Fannin earlier today, I was in having coffee. And he and I were kind of reminiscing, and when Bill Fairfield was chairman, it was when, I guess, this first issue was raised about needing to do something. And whenever, I don't know if it was Bill's tenure or Marty's early tenure, when we started having the annual kind of planning sessions and things, it's always been put on there, and I'll admit, I was probably part of, well, let's see what's gonna happen with the state and grants. And we've now waited for, I don't know, 7, 8 years. And there has been, I think Melinda has lost some staff as a result of some of that. I'd like to think maybe now that they've got a budget, things have stabilized, but there again, I guess the message to Farnsworth, and it's not wait another year or 2 years or until a new governor's elected. I guess the message is minimize the building, the space, take into consideration, and I'm thinking of storage, you know, if we can find off-site storage that works for the department, it's a, whatever we can do. And someone, maybe the chairman made the remark, we do have other offices that aren't incorporated into the building. You know, if the time comes, let's design it such that we could, you know, have one end that's, could accommodate other offices. And Dave, Neil, we've talked about these concepts, and, you know, keep that in mind as we're designing the building. So, with that, I don't know if there are other questions, because I asked them to come up, because I'm like Darrell, I don't want to try to interpret things I don't understand. And then Wednesday night,
Schaefer made a good point. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You're saying do the same thing we did with the jail, and that is leave room for future expansion.
Yeah.
Leave some
Look at the
directions to
future.
go.
Yeah, look at-
or contraction,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I think that was Tim's point. If, you know, if we lose grants, we lose staff, you know, be able to utilize that space, move storage back on site or other offices, that sort of thing.
Make it nimble.
Because I think a majority of the board thinks long-term for what I still call the savings and loan building, regions building, whatever you want to call it. There's not a need for the county to own that if we can put it into good private use, especially if you own the tax dollars or tax rolls. Anything else?
Just one. Is this, all this is contingent on building a 19,000 square foot building like you had in the first paperwork? Like
That's the
drawing?
current picture of things, part of the
That's what
process.
you're going by as far as what if we, I noticed on here it says something about changes and all that, or in a committee to talk it over or whatever? Are we gonna have?
Well, I, correct me if I'm wrong, the process, I mean, that was a real preliminary, and now, meeting with staff and understanding the constraints that we want to squeeze this, now, I don't know, it's a 19,000, it may be
Right, part of-
18, you know.
Well, that's what I mean, once we
Yeah.
get past this point, and we all of a sudden wanna go, well, we don't like that building design. You know, I mean,
You don't like the site?
building design,
So,
Oh,
I mean, it
in
just,
a sequential process, what you'd like to do is see if you can't put enough time in the process where you can get those kinds of feelings identified early on, so they don't disrupt progress that you make. So part of what we're proposing here is another series of user group meetings to go through and make sure the spaces we're showing, the layout that we're showing, still makes sense to anybody, or does it need to be refined? Should it be bigger, should it be smaller? You know, a lot of, you have to sort of make decisions. Eventually, you kind of have to make decisions and either stick with them or change it. It'd be nice, I use the analogy, I guess, which is kind of a little bit dated now, of like developing a photograph. I like to think that the image that we're trying to get to at the end of the day is the same image at the beginning, at the end. It's just at the beginning, it's all amorphous. You're trying to define what it would be, and each step of these along the way gets a little bit more clear. But if we've got the right vision, at the end of the day, it's the same vision. It's just crystallized and all the details come into focus. So one of the things I'm not 100% sure, the question is, we have enough storage or too much storage? Those are things we want to talk through and have the discussion so we can make decisions. So do we want to have that, or maybe we don't want that? Maybe the building should be 20,000, or maybe it should be 17,000 square feet. You know, or maybe less, depends on another round. So if you think about the last process, we did some of that, but we were looking, that was one thing we were looking at. The other discussions were the existing building and other properties, things like that. So this time, the picture's getting a little more clarified. It's this particular building program. We go through that process again and drill down more specifics. And the more we do that, the more exacting we can.
Well, I think one of the main things is we want to make sure the planning is done correctly, because once you get into the bids are out and construction start, then to make changes is very expensive. So we need to plan this right
So
from the beginning.
one of the things that are included in the schedule, and of course that timeline, I just made a schedule, but I showed for each one of the steps to having a good solid 3-week period where there could be a lot of discussion about it and make sure, is this really what we want to do for the next step or not? You know, and that would involve review of whatever the cost picture that we're putting together, the square footage, the layout, what it looks like, all those sort of things, so that ideally then you'd feel good about that decision each time. And then the next step, we get that much more detailed, but you'd like to think we can move it forward each time.
Just refining it. It's a logical next step to refine it now that the site's, selected and this is what's
I guess,
next.
and I wasn't personally involved, I was on the board when we did the Law and Justice Center, and then as a follow-up this building. There was I don't know if it was a property committee or a subcommittee, I remember Bill Flock kind of led the effort, and they were meeting on a fairly regular basis with the architects and contractors, in that case the construction managers and everything. And there's always those little decision points and that sort of thing, whether it's this committee or another, that's up to the chairman. And if you look at the timeline, there's a whole lot of those points there, so you make sure down the road you got it the best, as you best want it, I guess. Whether that's square footage costs, we won't talk about the color of the roof,
I mean, eventually you get to
or
that
whether it's a
kind of
flat
detail.
roof or a sloped roof, that's
Right.
history now.
With today's technology, to tell which way the water's gonna flow on the lot, using this, $10,000 for a topographical survey seems a little high. I guess I don't know if that's just a ballpark estimate, or if that's,
Yeah, so what we're doing with that, Darrell, is we'll pick up all the, we'll pick up all the utilities, we'll pick up all the grades, we'll have the whole,
so it's
back
not
to the future.
topographical entirely.
It's pretty inclusive to get, to the edges of the property, to pick up the whole property. And, make sure that there's a good picture for what we're doing now and even any expansion as well. Back to that looking into the future. So it's a pretty inclusive survey. Not just this site, it's going out to the edges as well.
Just seemed kinda high. I figure about half that.
And I'm not sure how we price that. I think, we would, we'd be happy to do that on a time and expense basis. Whatever it is, it is. It's kind of a budget number, really.
Well, I know Jeff
And the fair
talked
way
to
to do it would
the
be T&M.
surveyors and reviewed the project with them, and that was their feel for what kind of magnitude it would be, but you're right, that could be done in TNA.
Yeah, we do it, T&M, sure. Yeah. Just, I think that's a fair way. It's a kind of a budget item, really.
Is that like on-site engineers are out there with their instruments and they're finding every square foot and what its elevation is and all that
Yes.
sort of? Don't we have a lot of that information on our GPS databases that we paid big bucks to do the whole county?
Yeah, they're not all that accurate though. You know, they're, you know, with our drainage, boy, around here, it's so flat that, and, you know, we've got access to that information, but it's just not as accurate as you'd want. Plus, with regard, what other work that involves is to pick up, back to your question, Darrell, about can we do this by gravity?
Right.
We want to get into the manholes and, you know, find out, you know.
It's more
what-
than just the surface though.
Yeah, the surface is a big part of it, but we've got to get into all the pipes, we've got to get Julie locates, you know, and all those utilities to see what we're connecting to. We have to make sure we've got sizes on that, to make sure that, you know, like the water mains are adequate, you know, so that we don't have any surprises with regard to sprinkling a building. So it's a pretty in-depth analysis.
Well,
of
regarding
utilities.
water mains, sewers, underground lines, all the Julie information, isn't that already on somebody's database?
Not that,
You go to dig, Julie will come out, or they'll send somebody out to stake all that stuff. And there are maps, I mean, there's sewer maps and gas maps and electrical and all that underground stuff.
But they didn't tell you the depth
You
of all
don't,
that?
No,
you don't dig based on those maps, that's why they come out and stake it. I
Yeah.
know from experience.
we pop all the you know, whatever manholes we're connected to, we'll get actual elevations. You know, there are maps, but they're not really compiled, you know, they're not really brought together for how this fits the site. So, you know, what we don't wanna have is one of those chutes, you know, where we got a sanitary sewer that's too shallow for gravity. We would just wanna make sure this thing fits together, so that we don't have any of those kind of surprises. And yeah, it is ground elevations, and yeah, you know, we're well aware of the GIS, you know, information, but, I mean, this thing's gotta be right, because, you know, if we blow it, you know, in those elevations, it's a lot of money. You know, the dirt work or, you know, parking lot, we'll do preliminary layouts on parking lots, certainly we'll do the spaces on parking and figure out where it drains. And I, you know, I know firsthand, you know, how hard it is to get drainage here because it's just so flat. Detention, you know, is something else we'll have to worry about. You know, that's part of what we'll get into as well for, you know, to meet city code. It's just involved, but Darrell, I think you got a good question. If it's less than that for the topo, it should be billed less, so, you know, we'll do that T&M, that's not, that's the fair thing to do.
Anything else? Carol?
If everyone else is done. Have you done this type of building for other counties? A health and education building?
Done a lot of similar buildings, a lot of bigger, heavier duty actual hospitals and medical office building projects, and then a lot of that are either educational, like in the actual K through 12 or higher education context, or this one's kind of a little bit of a blend between the two. But
And where have you done the medical office buildings?
larger ones in Bloomington, Normal, Peoria, smaller ones like in Clinton, the little rural health center. That one's got a little age on it now.
Like if I wanted to look them up online,
Sure.
would they be, or
If
do you
you-
have like a list of all your projects on your
Right.
website?
We have an SOQ that lists the medical office building experience. If you'd like to see that, that would be the easiest way to give it to you.
Okay. Yeah, I'd sort of just like to see, you know, and like how many square feet they have and so on and so forth.
Some of the projects are in the 100,000 square foot range, and then quite a few of them are in the 30,000 square foot range. And we've done some smaller little outreach facilities like for down in Hoopston and Milford that were like just little 2 dock or 1 dock, call them dock in the box, that are only more residential, maybe only 1,500 square feet or 2,000 square feet. So a big kind of range.
Projects in, we were just talking about Lincoln, healthcare, office type buildings, Carroll and Lincoln, Clinton, Watsika Airport.
Yeah, the work in Watsika's mostly been at the hospital, surgery department addition, renovations and things. Probably one that I really feel good about, if you'd want to see, is down in Pana, south of Decatur. It's a critical access hospital that we're doing it's about a $20 million addition and renovations to it. It's halfway through construction right now, but excuse me.
Did you do any of the work on the hospital out here, St. James?
I
You
did. Yeah, I did.
I'm sorry, architecture.
What part of that?
Civil survey,
For the main?
whole site,
Whole site?
yeah,
Mhm.
land acquisition, we worked with.
Dave?
Well, I thought of this name on the way up, Urosevich, remember
Yeah.
Urosevich was here? And then Dave Oaks, we worked with Oaks and Urosevich.
Well, they also did the new nursing home
Good Samaritan.
out here.
Good, Sam?
Good saying, yeah.
But OSF, a whole lot of projects with OSF over the years, Broman, everything from land acquisition, for Broman through
We had
full design.
10 years of projects with Ottawa, the hospital in Ottawa. It's OSF now, but at the time it was Community Hospital of Ottawa, then it was Ottawa Hospital, Regional Healthcare Center. But that included several medical office buildings, cancer center, renovations inside the hospital, parking decks, 2 different ones. In addition to their medical practice, they had kind of like a prompt care, for lack of a better term, sort of function to it. So that addition was probably in the 20,000 square foot range, and the building was already about 20,000 square feet. So quite a few things in Ottawa.
Lot of, it's been, we've worked for the larger entities, which is good, in between OSF and Advocate, out of Chicago as well, plus Broman over the years, but probably the better experiences with the community hospitals, and that's
that's
kind of
true.
been your expertise.
Well, that's brought
Yeah.
me, I moved to Central Illinois 22 years ago to serve downstate rural hospitals, because the firm I was with before was exclusively healthcare. It was all for big systems and it was all over the country. And to be honest with you, those projects, even though they're big and glamorous, are awful to work on. They take too much time, and the systems are kind of tough to work with. And
Travel.
I like the idea of working for some more personalized projects, like started off in Clinton at John Warner, and then just followed relationships around. So currently, right now, we're doing another about $20 million job in Morrison, it's over by Iowa. Similar kind of thing of some additions and renovations, but it's very enjoyable type.
Where I was going with that is to try to get a handle on potential costs for similar structures.
Sure.
And have you ever had any issues with ADA compliance?
No.
Okay.
I mean,
It's very clear
one
what
thing
the
I-
standards
It's a good
are.
question, though.
It is, but one thing I learned,
Other subject.
I got my own personal
Do you ever-
knowledge of that through doing an Air Force hospital. And then part of that process was directly with the people in Washington. So just had a heavy dose of studying that, and so you just have to pay attention to it.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, it's okay. Do you ever testify as an expert witness on such issues?
Yeah.
I would try that.
Just 2 birds with 1 stone.
What is the difference between, it says here that this is not intended to be a FEMA grade storm shelter?
Right.
What's the
So-
difference with what you're proposing at a FEMA grade storm shelter?
So what I'm proposing more along the lines of what we do in an elementary school, or one that I did is in Fisher, where we took the center core where all the locker rooms and built reinforced concrete block walls and the FlexiCore concrete precast slabs. And they're reinforced and they're all good. But if you put FEMA standards on something the foundations are 3 times bigger. It's just, I mean, it's probably got better structural capacity,
More
but,
like a bomb shelter than,
but yeah, it's just, the cost just goes up tremendously, and I don't have a report to say how much, but I would think
When,
it's wasted.
when you
money.
talk about, I'm so familiar with the Parsons, and I
Yeah.
think everybody else.
Built.
And I even know the general contractor that built that. That certainly wasn't built to FEMA standards.
No.
Saved a lot
But
of
it
money.
worked.
Every vehicle and the remainder of the building around it, literally dozens of vehicles disappeared from that site. I drove by that afternoon, and there was that restroom, and everybody
Well, one
survived.
thing that brought that to my mind was, it's been probably 10 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer, in the outlet mall on the west side of Bloomington. There was people that wanted to use that, and the idea was they wanted to put a storm shelter inside. They wanted, by the time we went through and tore out so much concrete to build, the footings were so huge, it just blew the cost. It just didn't become reality for them at all. And I always wondered, like, is that really gonna be that much more effective?
Any other questions? And I do appreciate,
Darrell, to your question about the storm, we're doing a host of storm shelters in Texas. We got a small office in Frisco, Texas, and there's, I guess you'd call them school grade. Like you said, Dave, they're not the FEMA, but boy, they are, it's become a whole line of work for us down there.
No, we didn't do the FEMA ones in Missouri for their state parks.
I guess I just wanted, if we're telling people that we're building a storm shelter for you, we're building a storm shelter for them. We're not fooling around, we're not,
But that's a
Lying
good
to 'em.
example of what, so that deserves to be talked through to a point of actual action. Because maybe you want to be able to say it is a FEMA grade storm shelter and just do it upright.
I just want them safe.
It's kind of like the difference between high-speed rail and higher speed rail. It's safer. But you're basically talking about a Texas pantry, just some, like you said. There's no other standard to which you can point us to?
Well, building codes, I mean, we'd be designing to IBC compliant structural. You're just building a very stout box, and that's all to code. It's just not necessarily rated for, you wouldn't want to advertise it as a tornado shelter, you'd probably call it a safe room, just so you're not.
So schools are not tornado shelters then, is
Not usually, no.
not usually, okay, good to know, I didn't know that.
go to the interior hallway and stay away from the windows.
Locker rooms.
Cost it out. Cost it out.
Yeah, I mean, that is the good example of something where part of the process could be, well, how much more would it?
Then what's the cost, you know, like you said, to get to
Chase
the
that down.
FEMA.
Get that level.
Yeah,
Then at least you have something to base that decision on,
Does the hospital have FEMA grade shelters?
not usually.
No.
But they're built to a pretty strong, by the time you plug in the seismic design and importance factors and all the things, they're built pretty stout, so.
Seismic design, earthquakes.
Yes.
Would this be like earthquake resistant?
It would be compliant with, I'm not familiar exactly what we would need to do here in this, but I think we're in a light seismic zone, there's a little bit, but it wouldn't be anything that you wouldn't see in regular institutional or commercial work. It comes down to ceiling bracing mostly, and then the types of structural connections. Probably some extra fasteners with the wood frame members.
Is the $94,000 an absolute max?
That would be, yeah, so that includes the E&M for the site survey, so that, yeah, so it'd be a max. But it's not like a fixed amount.
Oh, it's not a fixed amount. It's not a not to exceed?
It would be a not to exceed, but
Not to
not a
exceed.
lump sum.
Yeah. So the answer, I guess the answer is yes, it is an absolute.
Yes. And so,
Anything else?
Thanks, guys.
Do I appreciate you guys coming up. And
Yeah, glad
we're gonna
you-
be able to work on this evening, right? Finance.
Yeah, so,
Well, we'll get back to it.
I'll do it.
It would be beneficial.
Okay.
I guess.
Okay. Shavers, do you? Yeah, I can figure that out. Yeah, I gotta change one thing with that.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Six.
Thank you, folks. Thanks for your time. Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you.
We'll get out of your way.
Be safe.
Yeah, see you.
Take care.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay, there. Who's got my agenda? Okay, budget requests. I think it got disseminated, and then Elena, thank you, put together a cover summary, and I will plead honesty right up front. I got it and I printed it, and something else happened and I didn't get a chance to go through it. I don't know if anybody's got any specific questions. I think Don worked with Diane and put it together. There's an $8,000 increase, which out of $1 million plus, I feel pretty good about.
Is that for a specific thing?
Some of it, I moved the overtime to general maintenance. And I doubled it. We're already up to at the end of June, we were $2,600 in overtime, and we still haven't gotten into the winter months. And so I raised that, and then we moved the other two custodian and two maintenance guys into the one, okay, that's 150 category, but there was some paper shredding. We took all that and put it together instead of having separate buildings and separate accounts. We put that all into the general account. And we only had like $1,000 down for that. I added up and figured out what it was going to be for the rest of the year, or for a year for those buildings, and it was coming like $2,000.
They show meetings and travel expense hooked up 2,000.
Yeah, we only had $1,000 in there, and I signed up one of our maintenance guys to a class, well, several classes, and that was $1,400 just for that. And there's several levels to that, how high we wanted to go, but I didn't think 1,000 was adequate.
It's not wasted money.
No, it ain't. No, it's good. I took the same classes. I took 2 levels of it, and it's worth every dime. Some of this we get. I can't promise this, but we got reimbursed when I took it. We got ComEd reimbursed a third. Heartland College had a grant, and they reimbursed a third, and the county paid a third. So I mean, it's kind of. But I can't promise it that we're going to get that. I don't know if it'll be available.
The grant you need.
Yeah. But that's where that'll come from.
And now you have all the tools, but you've got $3,000 increase in tools?
I didn't do that, I don't think, did I?
Right at the bottom.
It's the same, Darrell. It's the same.
It's the same, 4,000 carried forward.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's the same as last year.
Oh, okay, budget-wise.
Yeah.
I'm looking at estimated.
I mean, there'll be another round of review, obviously finance, but unless there's other questions, I'd entertain a motion to forward it on to finance so it can be compiled with the entire budget.
So moved.
Ambrose, seconded by Holt. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. And if you have other questions, you should go through it. Don't call me, call Don. I mean, if it's about why it's here or not there, or that sort of thing.
I'm assuming that was just for the budget, and we're gonna talk about the cap.
Yeah,
separate?
yeah. And then, capital requests. There was two that was attached. And then there's a third one on this summary sheet.
I think it was on the back, and they were all of the ones that I sent out.
Oh,
But I did
this
send a
two-sided
couple.
printing saving paper,
Yeah,
tricky.
exactly.
No, I still don't.
Do you wanna see mine? Yeah, it's on the very back.
Oh. It's on the Superior, okay, gotcha.
Is this the ADA stuff or is this one that? Marcus read.
Is this Colmeyer, I assume?
No, it's, actually, this is just for the landscaping.
I understand, but it's for a memorial.
Yeah, they, there was a county officer killed in the line of duty, I believe it was 1917.
Oh, okay.
And he
I just,
never-
I was
never
concerned,
acknowledged. Yeah, never
it was
acknowledged.
Casey, I wondered why we were doing it for the city, or
Yeah.
if they were, okay.
This is for a county officer.
We probably should roll this landscaping in with the memorial request that's actually going to Sheriff Jail License and just make that one request.
Yeah,
If the
together.
committee's okay with that.
I would think that appropriate. That way you'll have total cost.
Yeah. And then the food slots, this is, this was actually approved last year and it was budgeted over 2 years. So it's just so you're aware of the extra, amount that's coming through. And then, so the only new request then, other than the memorial, is the $192,000 for the, fence around the Justice Center.
I know we've talked about this at least once in previous years, or at least I've talked to Superintendent Cox. Bill, you wanna,
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it has been discussed before, and it was, give yourself some time to react, because more and more of it happening across the nation. So, give yourself time to react. Yes.
Bill, when you say the rear of the building is open, is that your terminology for there are no armed guards at the rear of the building?
That, and
Because
once you get into the back hallways, it's entirely accessible, which will be corrected in this project.
Now, when court's in session, there's usually an officer in the courtroom, right?
Correct.
And-
Almost always.
But that's only when court is in session.
Correct.
So anybody could still be wandering around from the back end through the back hallways and stuff, couldn't they?
We have cameras and we pay attention to it, but we wanna make more barriers.
I don't wanna interrupt, but I do wanna interrupt. Point of order, shouldn't security issues like this be discussed in executive session?
shouldn't what?
Shouldn't security issues be discussed in executive session?
I don't know if there's provision.
Well,
There
you're
is.
you're
Yeah, maybe
basically
have to be more
identifying the
I trust
weaknesses.
the folks in this room, but
Yeah.
I did look before we got
It's all
started.
fully
But they're on
okay.
camera.
But it's on camera.
That's
If we, get into much more detail, I certainly think so.
Depends on the detail.
You know,
We
where the
got-
cameras are and things like that, or
Yeah, well, $192,000 And frankly, I'm always, you know, this really goes to finance, again, who will consolidate all of them. And I'm sure this year won't be any different than past years, where there's kind of a understood allotment of X, and we'll probably have a total above X. So it really isn't finance, it becomes prioritization.
But this is the only number Bill's got so far, so it could go up or down. And
Yeah, the other bids could be lower or higher, but I
Now,
don't know.
on the other bids, I assume that you asked them to work with Bennett's for the electrical.
Bennett's bid is totally separate.
Yeah.
All they're doing is providing the pedestal and the mobile gate and the power motor that runs it. Bennett's is taking care of the rest of that. So I separated those bids on purpose because
So it'll be a fence company and Bennett,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's not gonna be higher, because we've got
We
this.
already got Bennett's numbers, so the only,
The 192,
there's only
does it
a portion
include
of it that could
Bennett?
change.
Well, we
that's
you
total.
better have
That's
those bids
everything.
before
It's
Wednesday.
everything I could,
So it's more than just.
We
We
need-
bid next
we-
year,
It's more
because it
money.
would be for next year, so these bids won't even.
it's a,
Oh.
These are just
fence,
budgetary.
total fence all the way around with a mobile powered gate.
We really only require that they have one.
Prison.
Except really nice looking.
So if you wanna forward it to finance, you can forward it to finance, and you can forward it with a recommendation, without a recommendation, or you can give it a priority. There's priorities that are marked down there, and you can do that, it's up to you.
I would like to make a motion.
I'd rather talk to,
Forward this and any other bids that come in to the finance committee without any recommendation.
I'm just thinking about talking with Bill more in executive session about different things. And then, well, I was kind of against the gate. I understand your doors and all that stuff.
I said you could,
Yeah,
you're gonna have to
I
give me
don't.
a second.
It's to keep people out of that area, so you have a barrier. We bring in high profile inmates through there. I mean, we have a maximum security institution in our, we also bring people in from Stateville, from all over the state, Menard, and they're high profile. And you're leaving a door, I'll give you a perfect for instance, in '87, Superintendent Taylor was killed. We just had that retrial of 3 of the people that were convicted for that trial were in that trial with their families in the audience. At this particular point, when that door opened, they could have came through that door. That's another scenario. It's not simply for the judges and simply for the state's attorney, even though those folks are important people. I'm not saying they're
I
not.
understand that part. I mean, to me, in my view is I would have extra guards inside that door. When that door opens, you'd be ready, instead of, expensive fence.
You're just giving yourself some space is what you're doing.
I understand that, I understand.
Is
I
my
don't want
motion
the
is-
fight, I don't want the fight in our building
Oh,
at
yeah,
any time.
we've got a motion on the floor, I don't have a second. We really shouldn't be
what?
discussing until we have a second.
What was the motion for, you wanna know?
Motion was to forward it to finance with no recommendation. Which, to me is,
Second, so I can ask a question.
okay, motion second.
Bill, Don, are we gonna be revisiting any of these again tomorrow night at Sheriff?
Probably.
In jail?
Units on the roof. We got that working, and, we had to replace a security door lock, interlock switch on one of the doors leading out of the Sally Ford to the courthouse. Leads to the courthouse elevator. Steve Shoup is one of our maintenance guys. He's been here, right at a year. I've been moving him around. He's been training at the, jail over there, public safety complex. I've had him working at the Law and Justice Center and out at H&E building. Been moving him around a little bit. At the public safety complex, staff replaced the camera in the hall, the receiving dock, repaired exercise equipment in the indoor rec area. We had a fan, motor, and bearings go out on number 1 ERS unit on the roof or upper level, and our staff repaired that. We had a new threshold put in the southwest exterior door during the changes of the season. The concrete would raise and lower, and it got so that door you couldn't trust it to lock. So we had the concrete chipped out and had a new sill put in, and it's working correctly now. And we had a fire in the kitchen. It caused damage to the combination flat top grill and oven. The jail staff was to put out the fire before the Ansel system could ignite. The fire was located on top and under the flat top of the grill. They rolled the oven outside, and we had a company come in, Lindsay's Hood Cleaning Service, and he cleaned the oven and everything. The staff made the repairs that were needed, and we put the oven back in service. Seems that there's a grease tray that needs to be emptied, and we believe the kitchen staff had not been doing that. And we think that's where the fire came from. The staff repaired multiple links in the plumbing for the last mixing valve, and it's due to be replaced in July. All the copper tubing going to them is wearing out, and we're getting leaks as fast as we can fix them, but we'll be able to fix all this with the new unit. We got the, got the Genie Man lift and repaired the soffit in the west side of the building. We also, while we had the lift there, we replaced the flagpole light and also several other parking lot lights. I got the softener, water softener has been rebuilt, had all the upgrades redone, and it's running, and I hope that should show a little savings in our water usage. At the historic courthouse, we had to Ray repaired some outside faucets. He repaired the swing gate at the treasurer's office. Staff also repaired the outside light of the AT office. Also replaced batteries for the running water. A lot of the restrooms all have battery-powered electric eyes on the toilets and the sinks, and they replaced the batteries for those. And we've had new plants around the building, and they've been on top of that, keeping them watered. I had to change filters and belts were needed at the historic courthouse. He changed all them. Replaced bulbs in the treasurer's office, repaired some carpeting in the historic courthouse. Reinstalled a roller shelf in the basement of the vault, historic courthouse. Public health and education building, one of the air conditioners was not working at the H&E, and Ray was able to get it running. The handicap rail needed several spots repaired, and Ray was able to do that. We had a soap measuring dispenser that wasn't working properly, and Ray got that working. After all the problems with the dead raccoon, Ray was able to find an outside entrance and get into the roof above the ceilings, and he was able to find the dead raccoon and remove it. He went ahead and made some doors outside of the building, so if there's ever a problem like that again, we can get up there and we have access to get inside there. That was quite a deal. Staff changed filters at the H&E building. There was an air vent up in the space inside above the ceiling, and Ray went ahead and he installed a ventilation cap over it just to be sure there was no other access for any other animals or anything. And he helped staff the H&E plant new plants and mulch flower beds. And the sewer problem at the H&E building, I had Popejoy come in and we dug that up, and what we found was it was like an 8-inch gooseneck attached to that, and basically that 8-inch tile used to have a lot more fixtures attached to that, and there was a lot more water that ran through that pipe. Well, there's only one toilet attached to it now, and basically there's not enough water flow to flush the trash down through the system, and it got down to the end and plugged up. And I had them take that take that gooseneck out. We put a T in, plastic T, and the gooseneck doesn't have to be in there anymore. We had the sewer department was out there, and they had no problems with us taking it out. And I think with that T in there, that should solve our problems. We should be okay. We found a sewer pipe ran to the west and to the east. And that was a big issue, trying to decide which direction it went, but, anyway, I think everything's gonna be fine there.
So the only thing he's hooked up to is that one toilet,
Yeah,
so the trap there should take care of it.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, we'll be fine with it now, I mean, it's, well, what we're gonna do is we'll try to keep adding an enzyme to that, you know, try to do that on a regular basis and keep everything broke down. And I've started Ray working at the Public Safety Complex and at the Law and Justice Center, and kind of moving the staff around a little bit.
That coon that got trapped, back to that. You didn't have access, is that correct?
No.
To that, what, there's a floor and then another floor was,
There's a suspended ceiling, and then there's the original ceiling.
okay?
And the only trap door we found was that big. And one of the areas on the southwest corner of the upper, you know, right below the roof, there was wood paneling in there, and Ray went up there and cut that open and got the lift up there and got in there. And he just went ahead and made some doors when he buttoned it back up, so.
That allowed him in there with that coon.
Yeah, he said you could stand up in there once you got in there.
Oh,
Wow.
But it was, to get to that, you had to crouch down pretty low, but he said after you got over that area, he said you could stand up in there.
okay.
But,
And you think, hopefully you got it?
well, no, there's another family living in the soffit,
Oh.
and they come out about 9 o'clock at night. But they're not getting in the building, they're in the soffit part.
Do they come down then?
Yep.
Can you trap them?
Well, we've been working on that, trying to,
Stand out there and shoot them.
yeah, well,
Oh, in the city limits.
I guess I could do that.
That's our leader there. Gee,
Joe's not here, so.
next time you need somebody to get a small hole like that.
I was gonna say, Steigen's not here, so I have to say for him, bullets cost a quarter.
Yeah, was that recorded?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Well, everybody knows then, if you wanna go out there and sit in your car at night, you want something to do,
Watch coons.
When you say the copper tubing is wearing out by the mixer valve,
yeah.
how's it wearing out?
I don't know, it just,
Thinner?
yeah, it just, right in the middle of a joint or an elbow, I mean, you go there and you can't even see it, but there'll be a puddle of water, I mean,
So it's wore through the side of the pipe.
Oh, yeah.
It's wore through the side of
oh,
the
yeah,
pipe.
yeah.
I've seen that with steam returns on
Yep.
on boilers.
This is hot, cold mixing valves, and
I've seen it.
it just, we've had 4 of them, and all 4 of them has done that.
Anytime copper tubing has an elbow or a bend, that velocity will eventually erode it. Unless you've replaced swimming pool heaters, which are coils of copper.
This Steve,
May
see
not
the ones work for
understand
MediaCom?
Yeah, yeah.
On TV, I
We've,
read all the
we've
time.
replaced the thing that's leaking, and you go back there a week later, and it's leaking right above it, you know, how
The
far.
guy that cut his boat in
So
half.
we put in the new unit, we just reform it all. New
Okay,
stuff.
anything else? I think everybody's had a chance to look at the bills, motion to approve. May, seconded,
Why not?
Holt, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Public comment?
I thought we were doing- Motion to approve.
Motion adjourned by Holt, seconded by Mays, all in favor?